The paper plate made a sad little thunk when my mother set it down in front of me. "There you go, sweetie," Meredith said, her voice dripping with that particular brand of fake sweetness she reserved for public displays of motherhood. "I know you're used to eating with the kids anyway." My name is Nicole, and I should have turned around and walked out right then. But I didn't. I never did. Benjamin got the good china, of course. The wedding china with the delicate gold rim that only came out for special occasions, which apparently meant any time my Harvard-educated finance bro brother graced us with his presence. His fiancée Jocelyn got matching plates naturally. Even Dad got real dishes. Me? Paper plate royalty, population 1. "So, Nicole," Benjamin said, cutting into his perfectly grilled steak with actual silverware while I held a plastic fork, "still playing house with other people's kids?" The backyard fell silent except for the sizzle of the grill. Dad cleared his throat. Jocelyn examined her manicure. Meredith actually smiled. "She's doing very well for herself," Dad offered weakly. "Oh, I'm sure she is," Benjamin continued, that smirk spreading across his face like spilled wine on white fabric. "What's the going rate for professional babysitting these days? 15 an hour? 20 if you're really good with diapers?" Jocelyn giggled. Actually giggled. "I work with families," I said quietly, cutting my steak with the edge of my plastic fork. "I help parents." Right, Benjamin waved his hand dismissively. "You're like what do they call it? A nanny? That's adorable, really. Most people grow out of playing mommy, but hey, if it pays the bills." Meredith leaned forward, her eyes bright with the kind of malicious joy that comes from watching someone else get torn down. "Benjamin's just gotten another promotion, you know. Senior vice president now. They're talking about making him partner before he's 35. 34, actually," Benjamin corrected, puffing up like a peacock. "Youngest in the firm's history." "Meanwhile," Meredith continued, turning to me with that smile that never reached her eyes, "Nicole's still changing diapers and singing lullabies to millionaire babies. At least someone's children are getting the benefit of her talents." The way she said talents made it sound like a disease. I took another bite of steak, chewed slowly, swallowed. "Must be nice," Jocelyn chimed in, "having such a simple life. No stress, no real responsibilities. Just playing with toys all day." "And the best part," Benjamin added, leaning back in his chair like he owned the world, "is that there's no pressure to actually succeed at anything. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? A kid cries? Oh no." They all laughed. Even Dad managed a weak chuckle. I set down my plastic fork and reached into my purse. The glossy brochure felt smooth between my fingers as I pulled it out and placed it gently on the table. The laughter died. Meredith's eyes locked onto the image immediately. I watched her face change, the cruel smile melting into something hungry and desperate. "Is that?" she whispered. "The lake house on Willow Creek," I said simply. "The one you've been talking about for, 15 years now?" Meredith's hand shot out to grab the brochure, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened it. "Oh my God, it's back on the market." "I thought it sold," Dad said, leaning over to look. "It did," Meredith breathed, her voice thick with longing. "But the buyers fell through. I've been checking the listing every single day for 3 years. Every single day." Benjamin rolled his eyes. "Mom, you can't afford that place. It's what, 2 million? 3? 4.2, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. "I looked it up," I shrugged. "Seemed like something you'd want to know." Meredith clutched the brochure to her chest like a love letter. "It's perfect. The wraparound porch, the private dock, those gorgeous bay windows. I could host book club there, garden parties. Benjamin, you and Jocelyn could have your wedding reception there." "If we could afford it," Benjamin muttered. "We could take out a loan," Meredith said desperately. "Use the house as collateral, or maybe your father's retirement fund." "Meredith," Dad warned. I watched this little family drama unfold, feeling strangely detached from it all. Like I was watching a movie where I already knew the ending. "Well," I said, standing up and brushing imaginary crumbs from my lap, "I should probably get going. Early day tomorrow." "Of course," Meredith said absently, still staring at the brochure. "More babysitting." "Something like that." I walked toward the house, leaving my paper plate on the table like the peasant I was supposed to be. But just before I reached the door, I turned back and smiled. "Oh, and Mom? You might want to keep an eye on that listing. I hear it's going to sell fast." The rejection letter from State University arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because it was the same day Benjamin got his acceptance to Harvard. "Nicole, honey, come downstairs." Meredith's voice rang through the house like a dinner bell. "We have news to celebrate." I was 17, sitting on my bedroom floor surrounded by college brochures for early childhood education programs. The thin envelope from State sat unopened on my desk. I already knew what it said. Thin envelopes never brought good news. When I got downstairs, Benjamin was holding a thick packet, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. Which, in Meredith's eyes, he basically had. "Harvard!" she shrieked, throwing her arms around him. "My baby got into Harvard!" Dad clapped Benjamin on the back. "Knew you had it in you, son." "Full academic scholarship, too," Benjamin said, because of course he did. They said my essay on economic theory was exceptionally mature for someone my age. Meredith pressed her hands to her chest like she might faint from pride. "I have to call everyone. Your Aunt Susan, the neighbors, my book club." "What about Nicole?" Dad asked, noticing me standing in the doorway. "Any word from your schools?" I held up the thin envelope. State University. Didn't get in. The celebration didn't exactly stop, but it definitely dimmed. Like someone had put a lampshade over the sun. "Oh," Meredith said, her voice flat. "Well, there are other schools." "What were you applying for again?" Benjamin asked, though I'd told him a dozen times. "Early childhood development. I want to study child psychology, maybe get into family counseling." Benjamin snorted. "You want to major in toys?" "It's not toys," I said quietly. "It's about understanding how children develop emotionally, how to help them process trauma, build confidence." "Sweetie," Meredith interrupted, "maybe this is a sign. College is expensive, and if you're just going to end up babysitting anyway..." "I'm not just babysitting. I want to help families, make a difference in kids' lives." "That's very noble," she said in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. "But Benjamin needs our focus right now." Harvard is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. 3 months later, I was watching 4-year-old Emma Rodriguez build a tower out of blocks while her mother worked from home upstairs. "Miss Nicole," Emma said, carefully placing another block on top, "why do some towers fall down?" "Well," I said, sitting cross-legged beside her, "sometimes the foundation isn't strong enough. Or sometimes we build too fast without making sure each piece is secure." Emma nodded seriously, like I'd just explained quantum physics. "Like when Mommy and Daddy yell, their tower falls down?" My heart clenched. Emma's parents had been fighting a lot lately, loud enough that the neighbors complained. "Sometimes grown-ups forget how to build their towers," I said carefully. "But that doesn't mean it's your fault when they fall down." Emma looked at me with those huge brown eyes. "Will you teach me how to build strong towers?" "Every day," I promised. That night, I called Selena. "I think I'm actually good at this," I told her, pacing around my tiny apartment. "Of course you are," Selena said. "You've been taking care of everyone else's emotional needs since we were kids. Remember when you talked me through my parents' divorce in 8th grade? This is different. These kids actually listen to me. They trust me. Unlike your family." I winced. "Selena." "What?" "I'm just saying. You've got this gift for making people feel heard and valued. But your own family treats you like you're invisible. They don't. Nicole, your mom served you dinner on a paper plate last week. I couldn't argue with that. You know what you should do? Selena continued. Start recording some of this stuff. The things you tell the kids, the techniques you use. Parents would eat that up. Who's going to listen to a college dropout with no credentials? Someone who actually knows what they're talking about. Which you do. 6 months later, I was working for the Shepherds. Michaela was 8 then, all wild curls and fierce intelligence. Her mother Sarah was battling cancer, and her father Clark had basically disappeared into his work to avoid dealing with reality. Why doesn't Daddy come home anymore? Michaela asked one afternoon while we worked on her homework. Sometimes when people are scared, they run away, I said. Even grown-ups. Are you scared of anything, Miss Nicole? I thought about it. Yeah, I'm scared of not mattering. Michaela looked up from her math worksheet. You matter to me. That night, after Michaela was asleep, I sat in my car in their driveway and pulled out my phone. I'd been thinking about what Selena said for months. I opened the camera app and hit record. Hi, I whispered into the phone. I'm Nicole, and I spend my days with some pretty amazing kids who've taught me more about life than any textbook ever could. I paused, looking back at the house where Michaela was probably dreaming about anything but her mother's illness. Today, I want to talk about validation, about how powerful it is to tell a child that their feelings matter, that they matter. Because here's the thing, kids know when you're just going through the motions, and they know when you really see them. I talked for 10 minutes about active listening, about getting down to a child's eye level, about the difference between hearing and understanding. When I finished, I stared at the video for a long time before finally uploading it to a new account I created. Raising Whole Humans. 3 people watched it that first night. By morning, it was 12. 3 years later, I was sitting in a coffee shop with Selena, staring at my laptop screen in disbelief. 200,000, I said for the 3rd time. My book sold 200,000 copies. And that's just in the first 6 months, Selena said, practically bouncing in her chair. The publisher wants to talk about a sequel. And did you see the email from that parenting brand? They want to sponsor your next video series. I scrolled through my inbox. Collaboration requests, speaking engagements, interview requests from podcasts I'd never heard of. My Raising Whole Humans account had 1.2 million followers. This is insane, I muttered. This is what happens when you actually know what you're talking about, Selena said. Remember that video you did about bedtime routines? It has 4 million views. The one I filmed in my pajamas at midnight because I couldn't sleep. That's the one. Parents were sharing it like crazy. Finally, someone who gets it, they kept saying. My phone buzzed with a text from my current family, the Washingtons. Nicole, thank you so much for the advice about Emma's anxiety. She actually slept through the night for the first time in weeks. You're a miracle worker. Speaking of which, Selena said, pulling out a folder, we need to talk business. I've been managing your brand deals and sponsorships, but this is getting too big for me to handle part-time. She slid a contract across the table. I want to quit my marketing job and work for you full-time. Operations manager, business development, whatever you need. I stared at the contract. Selena, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm begging. Do you know how much money you made last month? Just from the book royalties and sponsored content? I shook my head. $47,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? And that's a slow month. The month your sleep training course launched, you made $82,000. The numbers felt surreal. 6 months ago, I was making $20 an hour watching other people's kids. Now I was apparently running a business empire from my studio apartment. There's just one thing, Selena said carefully. Your family still thinks you're broke, right? They think I'm a struggling nanny who can barely pay rent. Why haven't you told them? I picked at my muffin. You know why. Nicole. Because the second they find out, everything changes. Suddenly I'll be worth their attention. Suddenly my opinions will matter. But it won't be because I'm their daughter or because I've always been this person. It'll be because I have money. Selena nodded slowly. So what's the plan? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Meredith's name flashed on the screen. Perfect timing, I muttered, answering the call. Hi, Mom. Nicole, honey, I need to talk to you. Her voice was thick with tears, which was unusual. Meredith didn't cry unless there was an audience. What's wrong? It's the house, the lake house. It's back on the market. I sat up straighter. Again? The second buyer fell through. Something about financing. Nicole, this is my last chance. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel like that house is meant to be mine. I've dreamed about it for so long. Selena raised an eyebrow, clearly listening to every word. Mom, houses don't work that way. If you can't afford it. I know. But maybe there's a way. Your father's been talking about taking out a loan against his retirement fund. And Benjamin said he might be able to help with the down payment. Benjamin said that? Well, he said he'd think about it. The point is, I can't let this opportunity slip away again. I've been driving by that house every week for 3 years, Nicole. Every week. I could hear the desperation in her voice. The same desperation I'd felt every time I tried to get her attention as a kid. I have to go, Mom. I'm at work. Of course, sweetie. Give those babies extra hugs from Grandma. She hung up, and I stared at my phone for a long moment. You're thinking about it, Selena said. Thinking about what? Buying the house. I looked at her. That's crazy. Is it? You could afford it. Cash. And then what? Give it to her? Surprise, Mom. Your failure daughter just bought you a $4 million house? Selena leaned forward. Or you could buy it and not give it to her. The idea hit me like a lightning bolt. I opened my laptop and pulled up the real estate listing. The house was gorgeous. Exactly the kind of place Meredith had always dreamed of. Wraparound porch, private dock, those bay windows she'd obsessed over. I can't just buy a house to spite my mother. You wouldn't be buying it to spite her, Selena said quietly. You'd be buying it for someone who actually deserves it. I thought about Michaela, now 13 and still dealing with her father's emotional absence. Sarah had passed away 2 years ago, and Clark had thrown himself even deeper into work. Michaela spent most afternoons alone, texting me about school drama and friend problems. The Michaela Shepherd Trust, I said suddenly. What? If I buy the house, I put it in a trust. For Michaela. She gets a stable place to call home, somewhere she can feel safe and loved. Selena grinned. And your mother gets to watch someone else live her dream. I stared at the listing photos, my finger hovering over my phone screen. This is either the most generous thing I've ever done, I said, or the most petty. Why can't it be both? Clark answered his phone on the 4th ring, sounding exhausted. Nicole, is everything okay? It's kind of late. I was sitting in my car outside the lake house, staring at the for sale sign. I need to talk to you about Michaela. What about her? Did something happen? Nothing happened, but I have a proposition, and I need you to hear me out before you say no. Silence. Then, I'm listening. I want to buy a house and put it in a trust for Michaela. Somewhere she can have stability, somewhere that's actually hers. Nicole, what are you talking about? You can't afford... I can afford it. Another pause. Longer this time. How can you afford it? That's not important right now. What's important is Michaela. She's been bouncing between your place and her aunt's house since Sarah died. She needs somewhere permanent. She has somewhere permanent. She has me. Clark, when's the last time you were home before 8 p.m.? No answer. She texts me every day after school because there's nobody else to talk to. She's 13 and she's raising herself. I'm doing my best here, Nicole. You think this is easy for me? I think you're drowning, and you're so focused on not going under that you can't see she's drowning too. I heard him take a shaky breath. What kind of house are we talking about? It's on Willow Creek. 4 bedrooms, private dock, big yard. She could have friends over, throw parties when she's older. It would be hers, legally. The trust would cover taxes and maintenance until she turns 18. This sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? I closed my eyes. There's no catch. I care about her, Clark. I've cared about her since she was 8 years old and asking me why her daddy didn't come home anymore. Jesus, Nicole. I'm not trying to replace you. I'm trying to give her something I never had. A place where she matters, where she's the priority. And what do you get out of this? The honest answer was too complicated to explain. How do you tell someone that buying a house for their daughter is partly about healing your own childhood wounds? That every time you see Michaela struggle with feeling invisible, you see yourself at 13, desperate for someone to notice you existed? I get to know she's okay, I said instead. Clark was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Can I see it first? Of course. 2 days later, I met Clark and Michaela at the house. The realtor, Janet, was already there with the keys. Oh my God, Michaela breathed, staring up at the wraparound porch. This place is incredible. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, Janet said, launching into her sales pitch. Original hardwood floors, updated kitchen, private dock with deep water access. We walked through the house, and I watched Michaela's face light up at every room. She ran her hands along the bay window seats, peered out at the dock, claimed the bedroom with the best lake view. Dad, look at this bathroom, she called from upstairs. It has one of those fancy tubs. Clark stood in the living room, arms crossed, staring out at the water. This is a $4 million house, he said quietly. 4.2, I corrected. Nicole, I need you to be straight with me. How do you have this kind of money? I looked around to make sure Michaela was still upstairs. I started a business, online content about parenting. It took off. What kind of business makes $4 million? The kind where you actually help people instead of just talking about it. He studied my face. You're serious. Dead serious. And you want to give this to Michaela. Just like that. Not give. Trust. She'll own it when she turns 18, but she can live in it now. With you if you want. Or you can keep your place and she can stay here with a live-in caretaker. Miss Nicole, Michaela's voice echoed from upstairs. Come see this closet. It's bigger than my entire bedroom. Clark rubbed his forehead. This is insane. Dad! Michaela came running down the stairs. Can we get it? Please? I know it's probably too expensive, but maybe we could rent it or something? Clark looked at his daughter, really looked at her. For what seemed like the first time in months, she was practically glowing with excitement, more animated than I'd seen her since her mother died. Michaela, I said, what if I told you this house could be yours? What do you mean? I mean legally yours, in a trust with your name on it. Her eyes went wide. Are you serious? I'm serious. She looked between me and her father. But how? Why? Because you deserve a place that's just yours. Because you're one of the most amazing kids I've ever known, and amazing kids deserve amazing things. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. You would do that for me? I would do anything for you. She threw her arms around me and I felt something break open in my chest. This was what love looked like, not conditional, not performance-based, just pure and simple and real. Clark? I said over her shoulder. He was wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Yeah, he said roughly. Yeah, okay. Let's do it. Janet cleared her throat. So should I draw up the paperwork? I smiled, still holding Michaela. Make it out to the Michaela Shepherd Trust. 3 weeks later, I stood in the empty living room of the lake house, watching contractors measure windows for new curtains. Michaela sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching furniture arrangements in a notebook. The couch should go here, she said, pointing to the wall facing the lake, so we can watch the sunrise while we eat breakfast. Good thinking, I said. What about the dining room? Big table, like really big. So I can have all my friends over for dinner parties when I'm older. The contractor, Mike, looked up from his measuring tape. You planning on entertaining a lot? I want this to be the kind of house where people feel welcome, Michaela said seriously. Where kids can come if they need somewhere safe to talk. Mike smiled. That's a pretty mature way to think about it. Miss Nicole taught me that homes should be about more than just having a place to sleep. They should be about feeling like you belong somewhere. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. At 13, Michaela understood things about love and belonging that my own family had never figured out. Speaking of which, I said, your dad's picking you up in an hour. You should probably pack up your sketches. Can I show you something first? She pulled out her phone and opened a video. I've been watching your content. My stomach dropped. Michaela, relax. I'm not going to out you or anything. But Nicole, this stuff is incredible. This video about helping kids process grief, it's like you were talking directly to me. She hit play, and my own voice filled the empty room. Grief isn't something you get over, it's something you learn to carry. And the goal isn't to make the sadness go away, it's to make room for joy to exist alongside it. That's when I knew, Michaela said, pausing the video. You didn't just buy me this house because you felt sorry for me. You bought it because you actually understand what it's like to feel invisible. Mike had stopped measuring and was pretending not to listen, but I could tell he was paying attention. Michaela, my mom used to say that some people are born knowing how to love people, and some people have to learn it the hard way. You learned it the hard way, didn't you? I sat down on the floor next to her. Yeah. I did. Is that why you haven't told your family about your business? Because you're afraid they'll only love the successful version of you? Sometimes I forgot how perceptive she was. Sarah had raised her to be emotionally intelligent, to ask the hard questions and sit with uncomfortable truths. Something like that. That's really sad, she said simply. They're missing out on knowing the real you. The real me isn't very impressive. Are you kidding? Michaela gestured around the room. You bought me a house. You've helped millions of parents raise happier kids. You made my dad cry happy tears for the first time since Mom died. How is that not impressive? Mike cleared his throat. Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. You're raising whole humans, aren't you? I nodded reluctantly. My wife follows your account religiously. She's always quoting your videos at me. Mike, Nicole says we need to validate Emma's feelings even when she's being unreasonable. Mike, Nicole says bedtime battles are really about connection, not control. Does it help? I asked. Our 4-year-old went from screaming every night to actually looking forward to bedtime. So yeah, it helps. Michaela beamed. See? You're changing lives. My phone buzzed with a text from Meredith. Nicole, honey, can you come to dinner Sunday? Benjamin has news to share, and I want the whole family there. Family dinner, I told Michaela, showing her the text. Are you going to tell them? Tell them what? About this. She gestured around the room. About me. About who you really are. I stared at the text message. Benjamin probably got another promotion or closed some big deal. There would be champagne and congratulations and stories about his brilliance. I'd sit there with my paper plate, listening to them celebrate someone who'd never once asked about my dreams. "I don't know," I said. "What if I came with you?" "Michaela, no. These dinners they're not fun." "I'm not going for fun. I'm going to meet the people who raised the woman who saved my life." "I didn't save your life. You gave me a home when my own father was too broken to see that I needed one. You showed up every day when everyone else disappeared." "You bought me a house, Nicole." "A house? How is that not saving my life?" Mike was openly listening now, not even pretending to work. "Besides," Michaela continued, "I want to see their faces when they realize what they've been missing. It's not about revenge, Michaela. I know. It's about truth. And the truth is that you're amazing, and they should know that." I looked around the room, at the bay windows Meredith had dreamed about, at the hardwood floors she'd imagined walking across, at the view she'd pictured enjoying every morning with her coffee. "Okay," I said, "but we're not telling them about the house until I'm ready." "Deal. But Nicole?" "Yeah?" "When you are ready, I want to be the one to hand them the deed." I smiled despite myself. "Why?" "Because I want to thank the person who gave me a home, and I want them to see exactly who that person is." Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt like walking into a museum exhibit titled, "The Perfect American Family," if you ignored the paper plates and the daughter sitting in the corner. "Nicole!" Meredith exclaimed when I walked in with Michaela. "You brought a friend." "This is Michaela," I said. "I used to be her nanny." "Used to be?" Benjamin looked up from his phone. "Did you get fired?" "Her mother passed away," I said quietly. "I still help out sometimes." The room went awkward silent for exactly 3 seconds before Meredith recovered with her hostess smile. "Well, any friend of Nicole's is welcome here. Michaela, what a pretty name. Are you hungry, sweetheart?" "Starving," Michaela said politely. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Ryan." Jocelyn appeared from the kitchen carrying a bottle of champagne. "Benjamin, should I open this now or wait until after dinner?" "What are we celebrating?" I asked. Benjamin grinned. "Partnership track. They're fast-tracking me, youngest associate partner in the firm's history." "That's wonderful," I said, and meant it. "Congratulations." 60% salary increase," he continued, because Benjamin never met a success he couldn't quantify. "Plus bonuses, plus equity. We're talking serious money." "How serious?" Michaela asked innocently. Benjamin puffed up. "Let's just say I could buy a pretty nice house with this year's bonus alone." "Speaking of houses," Meredith said, her voice turning wistful, "that lake house sold again, to some mystery buyer who paid cash. Can you imagine having that kind of money just sitting around?" I felt Michaela tense beside me. $4.2 million, Meredith continued. "In cash. The realtor said it was some kind of trust. Probably some tech billionaire buying it for their kid." "Must be nice," Jocelyn said, "having that kind of generational wealth. Some people are just born lucky." "Or they work for it," Michaela said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "I mean," she continued, "maybe whoever bought it earned that money. Maybe they built something meaningful and used their success to help someone they care about." Benjamin laughed. "Sweetheart, nobody makes $4 million helping people. That's investment money, trust fund money, old money. You don't think someone could build a business helping families?" "What kind of business?" Jocelyn asked, amused. "I don't know. Maybe teaching parents how to raise emotionally healthy kids. Maybe writing books about child development. Maybe creating content that actually makes a difference in people's lives." The room fell silent. Meredith set down her wineglass. "That's very idealistic, dear," she said carefully. "But those kinds of ventures don't typically generate serious wealth." "Why not?" Michaela pressed. "If someone was really good at it, if they helped millions of families, why couldn't that be worth millions of dollars?" Benjamin was staring at Michaela now, something shifting in his expression. Because, he said slowly, parenting advice is a dime a dozen. Anyone can tell people how to raise kids. It's not exactly rocket science. Is it not? Michaela's voice was getting sharper. Because from what I've seen, most adults have no idea how to talk to children. They don't know how to validate emotions or set healthy boundaries or help kids process trauma. Michaela, I warned quietly. No, it's okay, she said, looking directly at Benjamin. I'm just curious about something. Do you have kids? Not yet, but... So you've never actually had to comfort a crying toddler at 3 a.m.? Never had to explain death to an 8-year-old? Never had to help a teenager work through anxiety or depression? Benjamin's jaw tightened. I don't need to have kids to understand that parenting isn't some complex professional skill. Then why are so many parents desperate for help? Michaela interrupted. Why do they spend billions of dollars on books and courses and therapy? Why are kids' mental health rates getting worse every year? Jocelyn was watching this exchange with growing interest, her eyes darting between Michaela and me. Maybe, Michaela continued, the person who bought that house actually understands something you don't. Maybe they know that helping families isn't just idealistic, it's essential. And maybe they're successful because they're actually good at something that matters. Michaela, I said again, but she was on a roll. Maybe they've spent years learning how to help kids feel seen and valued and understood. Maybe they've built something beautiful from nothing, and they're using their success to give other people the love and stability they never had. The room was dead silent now. Even Dad had looked up from his newspaper. Jocelyn cleared her throat. You seem to know a lot about this mysterious buyer. Michaela smiled. I know a lot about people who help kids. I've been lucky enough to have someone like that in my life. She looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes. A question, a challenge, a promise. Actually, she said, reaching into her purse, there's something I want to show everyone. My heart stopped. Michaela, don't... But she was already pulling out a folded document, her hands steady as she placed it on the dining room table. I want to thank the person who gave me a home. Michaela unfolded the document with the deliberate care of someone defusing a bomb. This, she said, smoothing out the creases, is the deed to 847 Willow Creek Lane. The lake house you've been dreaming about for 15 years, Mrs. Ryan. Meredith's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. What are you talking about? Benjamin demanded, leaning forward to read the document. It's owned by the Michaela Shepherd Trust, Michaela continued, her voice steady and clear, which means it's legally mine, but I didn't buy it. She looked directly at me. Nicole did. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. That's impossible, Meredith whispered. Is it? Michaela asked. Nicole, how many followers do you have on your Raising Whole Humans account? My mouth felt like sandpaper. Michaela! 1.4 million, she answered for me. How many copies did your book sell? Don't. 300,000 and counting. How much did you make last month from your online courses and brand partnerships? Benjamin was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Nicole, what is she talking about? Michaela pulled out her phone and opened my Instagram account. This is Nicole, Raising Whole Humans. She's one of the most successful parenting influencers in the country. She scrolled through the posts, videos of me talking about emotional regulation, photos of activities I'd designed, testimonials from grateful parents. 4 million views on this video alone, Michaela said, showing them my content about helping kids process grief, the one that got me through the worst year of my life. Jocelyn grabbed the phone, her eyes widening as she scrolled. Holy shit! This is you? You're the Nicole everyone's talking about? Language, Meredith said automatically, but her voice was faint. Mom, do you have any idea how big this is? Jocelyn turned the phone toward Benjamin. I follow her. I've been following her for months. She's massive. Benjamin snatched the phone, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been fear. This can't be real, he said. Nicole doesn't, she can't what? Michaela asked sweetly. Be successful? Be talented? Be worth something? How long? Meredith's voice was barely a whisper. 3 years, I said quietly. It started 3 years ago. 3 years. Meredith stood up slowly, wine staining her white blouse. You've been lying to us for 3 years. I wasn't lying. I just wasn't telling you everything. You let us think you were struggling, Benjamin said, his voice rising. You sat there while you what? I asked. While you mocked me? While you called my work playing house? While you served me dinner on paper plates? We didn't know. You didn't know, because you never asked. You never once asked what I was actually doing with my life. You just assumed I was failing, because that fit your narrative better. Meredith was staring at the deed like it might bite her. You bought my house. I bought Michaela a house. There's a difference. You bought the house I've wanted for 15 years and gave it to a stranger. She's not a stranger. She's the daughter I chose to love. The words hung in the air like smoke. Meredith flinched as if I'd slapped her. That's cruel, she said. Is it? Or is it honest? Benjamin was still scrolling through my content, his face getting redder by the second. Do you have any idea what this looks like? My sister is some kind of internet celebrity, and I had no idea? Your sister, Michaela said, standing up, is someone who saw a 13-year-old girl losing her mother and decided to make sure she never felt alone. Your sister built an empire helping families love each other better. Your sister is extraordinary. She's manipulative, Meredith snapped. This whole thing is manipulative. Bringing you here, orchestrating this reveal, I orchestrated it, Michaela said calmly. Nicole didn't want to tell you. She was protecting you from the truth because she knew it would hurt your feelings to realize how wrong you've been about her. Wrong about what? About everything. Michaela's voice was getting stronger. You think she's the failure in this family? Look around. She's the only one who figured out how to love people without conditions. She's the only one who builds people up instead of tearing them down. Dad finally spoke from his corner. Nicole, is this all true? I nodded. The money, the business, the house, all of it? All of it. He set down his newspaper and looked at me. Really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in years. I'm proud of you, he said simply. Meredith whirled on him. Proud? She humiliated us. She made us look like fools. No, Michaela said, picking up the deed. You did that yourselves. She walked over to Meredith and held out the document. This house could have been yours. Nicole would have given it to you in a heartbeat if you'd ever once made her feel like she mattered to you. Instead, she gave it to someone who sees her worth. Meredith stared at the deed, but didn't take it. The useless daughter you never wanted, I said, standing up, turned out to be someone else's hero. I walked toward the door, Michaela beside me. Nicole, wait, Benjamin started. No, I said without turning around. I'm done waiting. The fallout started within hours. Selena called me while I was driving Michaela home. Nicole, your phone is blowing up. Someone recorded the whole thing and posted it on TikTok. What do you mean someone recorded it? Jocelyn. She live-streamed the entire reveal on her Instagram story. It's already been screen recorded and shared thousands of times. Paper plate revenge is trending. I pulled over, my hands shaking. This is a disaster. Actually, it's not. The comments are incredible. People are calling you a hero. This is what generational wealth should look like. She chose love over blood. Finally, someone who puts kids first. Michaela squeezed my arm. See? I told you people would understand. But not everyone understood. Benjamin called that night, his voice tight with panic. Nicole, you have to fix this. The partners at my firm saw the video. They're asking questions about my family situation, about why I didn't know my sister was successful. It's making me look out of touch. I'm sorry your reputation is suffering, I said, not sorry at all. This isn't a joke. My promotion could be in jeopardy. Can't you post something? Explain that it was all a misunderstanding? What misunderstanding? That you spent years treating me like garbage? That you never once asked about my life? That you mocked my career while I was building an empire? Nicole, please. I hung up. The next call was from Dad. Your mother liquidated her retirement account, he said without preamble. What? She was so desperate to buy that house before you revealed the truth. She took out loans, cashed in everything. She was planning to make an offer this week. My stomach dropped. Dad, I didn't know. I know you didn't. But Nicole, we're in serious financial trouble now. The house sold, the money's gone, and we're left with debt we can't handle. How much debt? Enough that we might lose our house. I closed my eyes. This wasn't what I'd wanted. I'd wanted them to see my worth, not destroy their lives. Dad, let me help. No, your mother won't accept money from you. She's too proud, too angry. She keeps saying you planned this, that you wanted to ruin us. I didn't want to ruin anyone. I know. But intentions don't always match consequences. The hardest call came from Clark. Nicole, I need you to stay away from Michaela. What? Why? Because this whole thing has gotten out of control. She's 13 years old, and she's being dragged through social media drama. People are calling our house wanting interviews. She missed school today because reporters were waiting outside. Clark, I never meant for this to happen. I know, but it did happen. And now my daughter is in the middle of some viral revenge story instead of just being a kid. She loves that house. It's her home now. A home that comes with a price I didn't understand. I'm putting it on the market. You can't do that. It's in her trust. I'm her father. I can dissolve the trust if I think it's in her best interest. And right now, I think the best thing for Michaela is distance from all of this. The line went dead. I sat in my apartment that night, scrolling through the comments on the viral video. Most were supportive, but some cut deep. Using a grieving child as a prop for revenge is disgusting. This isn't heartwarming, it's manipulative. She destroyed her own family for internet points. Maybe they were right. Maybe I'd let my pain turn me into someone I didn't recognize. My doorbell rang. I opened it to find Michaela standing there with a letter in her hands. I walked here, she said. Dad doesn't know. Michaela, you can't just... I wrote you something. She held out the letter. Before you read it, I need you to know that what happened at dinner wasn't your fault. I chose to reveal the truth because I was tired of watching them treat you like you didn't matter. I unfolded the letter, written in her careful 13-year-old handwriting. Dear Nicole, my mom used to say that some people are born knowing how to love, and some people have to learn it the hard way. You learned it the hard way, but you learned it better than anyone. You didn't buy me a house to hurt your family. You bought it because you saw a kid who needed to know she was worth something. That's not revenge. That's love. I know Dad wants to sell it, and I know you're feeling guilty about everything that happened, but I need you to know that for the first time since Mom died, I felt like someone chose me first. Not out of obligation or guilt, but because they actually wanted me to be happy. That feeling is worth more than any house, You taught me that homes aren't built on blood. They're built on the people who show up, who stay, who choose to love you even when it's hard. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing me. Love, Michaela. P.S. I don't care what anyone says online. You're not manipulative. You're just someone who figured out how to turn pain into purpose. That's not something to apologize for. I looked up to find her watching me with those wise eyes. Michaela, I'm so sorry this got so complicated. It was always going to be complicated, she said. That's what happens when you finally tell the truth after years of hiding it. But complicated doesn't mean wrong. She hugged me tight. Besides, she said, pulling back with a grin, I've decided I don't want to sell the house. Your dad said, my dad's scared. But I'm not. I want to keep it, and I want you to help me turn it into something amazing. A place where kids like us can come when they need to remember they're worth something. I stared at her. Kids like us? Kids who had to learn the hard way that love isn't guaranteed. Kids who know what it feels like to be invisible. Kids who need someone to choose them first. She was right. The house wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about transformation, taking something my mother coveted and turning it into something that actually mattered. What do you think? Michaela asked. Want to build something beautiful together? I smiled, thinking about all the paper plates and dismissive comments and years of feeling invisible. Yeah, I said. Let's build something beautiful. Turns out, some homes are built on love, not blood, and even paper plates can carry power if you know how to serve what's on them.
My name is Harper Ellen, and that night I wore black. Not the kind of black meant to stand out. It was quiet, tailored, deliberate, meant to blend in, meant to disappear. The gala was in full swing by the time I arrived. Strings played near the marble staircase. Laughter spilled like champagne across the ballroom. I stayed near the side walls where no one looked too closely. At the far end of the room, under a chandelier that looked like it cost more than my car, my sister Sienna was glowing. Her company had just been acquired by a global environmental firm. The press called her visionary. Our parents called her the daughter we're proud of. I didn't have a name tag. I didn't need one. According to Sienna, I wasn't really supposed to be here. She spotted me during cocktail hour tray in my hand, walking past the floral arrangements. Then she leaned toward a venture partner in gold-rimmed glasses and said loud enough for the group to hear, "Oh, that one, she's just staff. Admin, maybe." I don't know, she helps with logistics. I didn't flinch, didn't stop walking. But I saw the smirk, I heard the laughter. And what none of them knew, what Sienna clearly didn't know, is that in 5 minutes, her CEO was going to walk onto that stage and thank me. By name. For the grant I funded. For the proposal I wrote. And for the work that made her entire company possible. Not bad for just staff. I was 13 when I first realized I wasn't the Ellen everyone was waiting for. At family dinners, when I talked about carbon soil retention or my summer science camp, my father would nod politely, then turn to Sienna and say, "And how was your piano recital, sweetheart?" By 16, I'd stopped bringing up science fairs. I still won them, but I stopped asking anyone to come. Sienna was magnetic. She always had been. She sparkled in conversation, looked flawless, in every photo knew how to laugh just right at our father's jokes. I don't think she meant to push me out. She just took up all the space, and no one asked why I stayed quiet in the corners. So I learned to build elsewhere. I studied environmental systems at a small liberal arts college. Nothing flashy, but I graduated early, moved into grant design, worked behind the scenes for nonprofits that didn't care whether I was the oldest or the prettiest. I was just useful. And when I'd saved enough and convinced one advisor that impact could be private, I created the Ellen Trust, a quiet little fund that gave real money to real projects. No PR campaigns, no family newsletters, just work. That's how I found Sienna's company. Or more precisely, how their CTO found me. They were struggling to meet ESG metrics. Their core technology was promising, but the board needed proof of community impact. Someone on their team submitted a pre-proposal to the Ellen Trust, not knowing I had any connection to the founder. When I saw Sienna's name on the third page of the application, I didn't tell anyone. I read the proposal 3 times. It was thin, but the tech had potential. So I rewrote it. I restructured their budget model. I revised every outreach promise, attached viable nonprofit partners, added projections, and aligned their metrics with existing USDA benchmarks. Then I approved it. Quietly. Anonymously. The grant was awarded under Ellen Trust Board approval. No one asked who the board was. There was no board, just me. I didn't need credit, that wasn't the point. What I always wanted, was to help the right things grow. Sienna sent out a press release the next week. Honored to receive a $4.59 climate impact grant, she wrote on LinkedIn. Humbled by the trust placed in our vision. No mention of the trust's origin. No inquiry into who had written the proposal she signed. I didn't blame her. She was doing what she'd always done, take what came easily, and shine in the light someone else turned on. Still, when I saw the invite to the gala, forwarded by a mutual connection in the nonprofit space, something in me stilled. The event was a celebration of collaboration in climate tech. Black tie, investor heavy. She was the keynote speaker, and the grant. It was the centerpiece of their new campaign. I searched the invite list. Nowhere did it mention my name. I called the venue under a different name. Said I was an administrative coordinator. Asked if I could assist with guest logistics. They added me under event admin and told me to check in at 5:45 p.m. sharp. I bought a black suit. The kind that made people assume I was either someone's assistant or someone's lawyer. And I showed up. Not to cause a scene. Not to demand anything. I just needed to see it. What she had done with it. What she would say. Whether any of it would include me. Because even after all these years, even after everything, there was still this soft, unreasonable ache in me. This impossible hope that just once she would turn and say, "My sister helped me get here." But she didn't. Instead, she looked at me, standing 2 tables away, holding a glass of water, and said, "She's just staff." And in that moment, I knew this was going to end differently than she expected. The worst part wasn't the words. It was the way she said them, casual, effortless, like I'd never been anything else. "She's just staff." A flick of her hand, a toss of her hair. And then she turned back to the table like the conversation was done. Like I was done. The woman she was speaking to, some West Coast investor in a metallic blue gown, barely spared me a glance. Just gave a tight smile and moved on to asking about Sienna's marketing strategy. I stood still for a second longer, holding the glass of water that wasn't mine. Then I walked. Not fast, not angry, just steady. Across the room, a young man in a rented tux nodded at me. Probably thought I was waitstaff. It didn't matter. I passed the coat check, slipped into the shadows near the main stage where the tech crew was adjusting audio cables. No one noticed. No one ever noticed. I leaned against the wall and looked around the ballroom. Sienna was in her element, laughing at the head table with a VC, executive on one side and our parents on the other. Dad had on his usual gray suit. Mom wore emeralds, probably the same ones she said were too delicate to wear to my graduate fellowship dinner 6 years ago. I watched them for a while. Not with resentment, just observation. It was like studying a species that had never learned how to see beyond light and noise. They didn't notice I'd arrived. They never had. In the far corner, I spotted a small name card propped near a chiller tray. Administrative, H. Ellen. That was me. I hadn't been assigned a seat, just a station. I went over, adjusted the linen, placed a few utensils in better alignment. It gave me something to do with my hands. Then I waited. The program was set to begin in 20 minutes. I checked the time on my phone twice, once from habit, once from nerves. A soft voice came from behind me. "Excuse me, miss, are you the one coordinating with the trust rep tonight?" I turned. The voice belonged to the operations manager from Sienna's firm. I'd spoken to her once months ago through an encrypted Zoom call under a pseudonym. Now she stood here clipboard in hand, completely unaware. I smiled. "Yes, I believe I am." She nodded. "Great. Just confirming we're still good for the CEO's closing remarks. To include the funding acknowledgement, I gave a small nod. Yes. He'll be brief but direct." She exhaled in relief. "Thank God. That funding saved us. We were close to losing the second pilot region." I didn't respond, just looked toward the stage. She followed my gaze, then checked her watch again. "All right, almost time." She walked away, never once asking who I was. That was the beauty of moving quietly. People filled in the blanks with whatever made them comfortable. Across the ballroom, the string quartet paused. Lights dimmed slightly. Someone adjusted the mic on stage, and just before the CEO stepped out from behind the curtain, I saw Sienna glance at the program booklet. Her smile wavered. Not fear, not suspicion, just confusion. As if something about this evening didn't quite fit the version of the story she'd rehearsed. As if a single thread, pulled too gently to notice, had begun to unravel something underneath. I stayed where I was invisible, in plain sight, because this wasn't my moment. Not yet. But it was close. The first thing the CEO said was her name. Not mine. Hers. "Let's begin by congratulating Sienna Ellen," he said, stepping into the light. "Her team has done what few thought possible, translating climate data into actionable, scalable tech. That alone deserves applause." The crowd clapped warm and polite. Sienna stood halfway, smiling wide, accepting the attention like oxygen. She didn't know it was about to change. The CEO waited for silence before continuing. "And while we're here to celebrate what this company has built, I want to acknowledge something that often goes unsaid. None of this." He gestured behind him to the projection screen, which now showed a slide titled "Core Grant Partners," would have happened without the trust and bold investment of an independent foundation. A quiet one that didn't ask for press, one that simply asked, "What if this worked?" Sienna's expression changed just slightly. Enough that I noticed. She leaned in toward her CTO, whispered something. He shrugged, looked as confused as she did. The CEO clicked to the next slide. This grant didn't come from a bank, or a government, or a think tank. It came from someone who read the proposal and believed not in the pitch, but in the potential. He paused. "And that person is here tonight." My heart thudded once. I saw my mother frown. My father shifted. Sienna blinked, then scanned the room like she was trying to do a head count. The CEO smiled. "Harper Ellen, would you join me on stage?" There was a moment, half a beat, where no one moved. Then the lights pivoted. And all at once, the center of the room was no longer hers. It was mine. I didn't rush. I didn't hesitate. I walked slowly toward the stairs, heels silent against the floor, the suit fitting just right. I passed my family's table. Sienna's face was pale. My father looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. No one clapped, not yet. The CEO met me at the edge of the stage. Shook my hand. "Ms. Ellen is the founder of the Ellen Trust," he said. "Her grant funded not only our pilot, but our expansion plan across 6 states. And more than that, her revisions to our original proposal laid the groundwork for the very outcomes we're seeing now." There it was. The truth, spoken clearly. I looked at the crowd at Sienna, still frozen in place, and I smiled. Not smug, not cruel, just quiet, whole. The applause came late, but when it did, it spread. People turned to look at me differently now. Some nodded, some whispered, a few tapped notes into their phones. But I didn't care. Because none of it was for show. The CEO gave me the mic. I didn't have a speech. I didn't need one. I cleared my throat. It's easy to celebrate things once they work. It's harder to believe in them when they're still just sketches and promises. I believed. That's all. Then I stepped back. Returned the mic. That was enough. I didn't stay for the rest of the program. I didn't need dessert or a closing toast. I slipped out quietly through the service hallway. picked up my coat, left without saying goodbye. As I passed a row of empty champagne flutes on a silver cart, I saw my own reflection in the polished metal. Still me, still silent, but this time not invisible. She found me in the lobby. I'd made it almost to the exit when I heard heels clicking fast behind me. Then a voice tight low, forced calm. "Harper! Wait!" I turned. Sienna stood under the chandelier, half lit. Her lipstick smudged. The clutch in her hand trembled slightly. She looked smaller than usual. Not physically, just deflated. "I didn't know," she said. I nodded once. I figured. Her mouth opened, then closed. She searched for something on my face, anger maybe. But I didn't give her any. "You didn't tell me." I raised an eyebrow. "Would it have mattered?" She blinked. Yes. I mean, maybe. We stood there for a moment in the echoing silence of too much left unsaid. Then I said, "I didn't come to humiliate you, Sienna. I came to see what you'd built, what you'd done with it." She looked away. "You could have told me that it was you." I shrugged. "You never asked who helped. You just assumed it was someone else, someone important. That's not fair, isn't it?" Her jaw tightened. I thought she started, then faltered. "I thought you didn't want to be involved, that you were off doing your quiet academic thing." I was. Until I saw the proposal your team submitted. Her eyes met mine again. "And you fixed it." I didn't answer. Sienna looked down at the marble floor, then back up. Her voice dropped lower. "You know what hurt? I waited. That I didn't recognize your voice. The one behind all that structure. The plan, the design. I didn't even suspect it was you." I folded my hands. "That's not what hurt me." She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry," she said. Not loudly, not for show, just enough to be real. I didn't say I forgave her. I didn't need to. That wasn't why I came. I didn't want the spotlight, I said. But I also didn't want to be erased. She flinched. "I get it," she whispered. "You were always the smart one. But I was always the one who knew how to smile right." I gave her a tired smile of my own. And now, she looked around as if realizing for the first time that the ballroom had gone quiet, that the world kept spinning even without her center stage. "I don't know," she said. I reached into my bag, pulled out the program booklet, and handed it to her. My name was listed now, page 4, small font under Keynote Recognition. That's the only line I wanted. She took it, clutched it with both hands. "What happens next?" she asked. I paused. "That's up to you." Then I turned and walked out through the glass doors into the cold air coat collar pulled tight around my neck. Behind me, the gala music resumed, faintly muffled by distance and doors and time, and I didn't look back. The office was quiet the next morning. I arrived before sunrise like always. The lobby lights still dim, the glass panels along the east wall just beginning to catch the color of morning. I brewed coffee, sat by the long wooden table I'd had built from reclaimed barn planks. The kind of table where things get done, not pitched, not posed, just done. I pulled out a folder marked Spring Cycle, Rural Access Grants. 12 proposals sat inside. I flipped through the first few handwritten charts, imperfect phrasing, but the kind of ideas that had dirt under their nails and roots deep in something real. That's what I cared about. Not galas, not applause. Impact. An hour later, a knock came at the side door. I opened it to find a girl no older than 20, holding a manila envelope to her chest like it might break. "You're Ms. Ellen?" I nodded. She smiled nervously. "I'm from Verdant High School. I heard your trust fund's first-time environmental projects. We don't have a science club. I'm trying to start one." I took the envelope. "What's inside a plan?" "Sort of." Her eyes dropped. "It's messy," I smiled. "Good. That means it's alive." She laughed. A real laugh, not the kind I'd heard echoing in the ballroom last night. I let her in, made tea, gave her one of the leather-bound notebooks I kept for interns. The same kind I'd once used to sketch out drip irrigation models at 17, sitting on my dorm room floor. When she left, I sat back down, looked at the notebook on my own desk. The one I'd carried through grad school, through failures and rejections and second starts. Next to it, the gala name tag from last night. Administrative H. Ellen. I didn't throw it away, I framed it. Not because I wanted to remember what she called me, but because I wanted to remember how wrong they were. How easy it is to underestimate the quiet one. A week later, I received an email. Subject line internship application. Ref the girl from Verdun. No resume. Just a paragraph. She said you listened. That you didn't laugh. That's enough for me. That was how it grew. One girl. One seed. Not revenge. Not spotlight. Just proof. That doing the work matters. That doing it quietly doesn't make it less real. Sometimes it makes it last longer. It's been 6 months since the gala. The framed name tag still sits on the corner of my desk, angled just enough to catch morning light. Visitors think it's a joke at first, until they read it closely and something shifts behind their eyes. I like that moment, that second of recognition, because it mirrors what I've lived, the quiet reframing of a story others thought they understood. Sienna and I don't talk often. There was one email, simple, short. She thanked me again, said she was revising her company's mentorship structure, adding a grant-writing bootcamp for junior staff. Said she wanted them to know where funding really comes from, what it actually costs. She didn't ask for a partnership or a favor. She just said, "You changed how I see it now, that's all." And that was enough. I don't need her to rewrite our past. I've stopped hoping for that. But I can respect a shift when I see one. That's something age teaches you. Quiet growth counts too. These days, the trust has expanded. We're funding projects in 6 states. 2 of my former interns now run their own programs. One teaches soil chemistry at a public college in Iowa. Another left her job in biotech to start a sustainable composting initiative for single mothers in Detroit. They still call me Miss Ellen. I've stopped correcting them. I don't need a title. I need the work to keep moving. Most afternoons, I walk the back garden trails behind the office. It's not grand, just native grasses, a few edible beds, a shaded bench made from driftwood I pulled from the lake last spring. It's quiet there, and for the first time in years, I feel like I belong in that quiet. Not because I'm hiding, but because I'm no longer waiting to be seen. That night at the gala, when Sienna called me just staff, she wasn't trying to be cruel, not intentionally. She was simply repeating a story the world had handed her, that the ones who stand at the front are the ones who matter, that the ones who speak loudest, shine brightest, or sign the checks are the ones who built the thing. But she was wrong. Because I did build the thing, I just didn't need a microphone to do it, and the CEO, he didn't save me with his words. He didn't vindicate me, he just told the truth. And the truth spoken plainly, without bitterness or noise, was enough to shift the whole room. Sometimes justice doesn't sound like gavel strikes or applause. Sometimes it sounds like a single name said clearly after a lifetime of being left out. Harper Ellen. I don't need it printed on a plaque. But hearing it that night, spoken with respect, with certainty, untangled something I didn't know, was still knotted inside me. These days, I live simply. I grow herbs on my kitchen windowsill. I write notes in the margins of student proposals. I send anonymous donations to rural schools that remind me of who I used to be, quiet, observant, trying so hard not to disappear. And every once in a while, I look at that framed tag, the one that labeled me as invisible, the one that now reminds me they saw what they wanted to see. But I always knew who I was. And now, finally, I don't have to explain it. Because the work speaks, the garden grows, and the world in its own slow way is starting to listen. They didn't know who I was when I walked into that room. To them, I was just his daughter, the quiet one in a black blazer, standing at the back of a military engineering conference she had no business attending. My father had made that clear. "Sloane's here as an observer," he announced, his voice clipped. "She works in biology now or something like that." They laughed, polite, dismissive chuckles that bounced off the polished metal of the conference table. One man even raised an eyebrow at me like I might be lost. But I wasn't lost. I had received the same classified brief the night before. I had seen the flaws buried inside their prototype's integration module, and I had chosen quite deliberately to say nothing. Not yet. My name is Sloan Mercer. I'm 33 years old. I hold a PhD in biodefense systems and wear the rank of major in a branch of the military that doesn't make press releases. My clearance outranks nearly everyone in that room, but none of that mattered to my father. To him, I would always be the disappointment who didn't follow his path, the one who picked cells over circuits, people over power tools, the one who walked away. So when he smirked and said, "She used to try to build things. Now she just studies bacteria," I stayed quiet. And then the door opened. Footsteps, a voice, a pause. And just like that, the room no longer belonged to him. My father always said, engineers build what matters. What he meant was his kind of engineer. Steel gears, pressure gauges, and torque curves, not enzymes, not pathogen response. Certainly not the kind of science I gave my life to. When I was 10, I told him I wanted to study how bacteria communicate in soil. He laughed. Not cruelly, just confidently, as if the world had already made its judgment, and he was simply delivering the news. "You'll outgrow it," he said. "Girls don't stay fascinated with dirt forever." But I did. I grew up watching his colleagues shake hands in conference rooms, just like this one gray tie's coffee breath talk of tolerances and weld lines. I memorized the shape of their praise when they spoke to my brother. I learned how not to interrupt. At home, I stopped talking about my lab internships. I stopped asking him to look at my test scores. I stopped waiting for the moment he'd say, "I'm proud of you." That moment never came. And by the time I was 25, and in uniform, I'd stopped needing it, at least that's what I told myself. So when I received the invitation to this technical review, sent not from him, but from someone under him, I already knew what I'd be walking into. A room where I wasn't really invited, just tolerated. The nameplate in front of my seat said, "Observer S. Mercer." The major had been left off, deliberately. No insignia, no branch. Just a name that looked as small on that table as it had once felt on my childhood bedroom door. My father didn't even look at me when he walked in. He greeted everyone else with firm nods and tight smiles. He launched into the presentation as if I were a shadow or worse, an ornament he didn't request, but couldn't send away. And I let him, because sometimes ghosts learn to haunt quietly. But as I listened to his breakdown of the containment shell, how it would withstand any biological interference, my hands tightened in my lap. They had missed something I had already flagged in my division months ago. And he was standing there bragging about its resilience, like it wasn't built on a false assumption. Like no one would ever call him on it. I glanced around the room. Men and women, nodding, scribbling notes. None of them knew what was wrong. Not yet. My father's voice hit that familiar pitch. We don't need to overcomplicate things with hypothetical scenarios. Engineering is about control, not theory. I smiled without showing teeth. That's when I knew he still believed the room belonged to him. He had no idea what was coming. I never expected him to understand what I chose. Military science was never part of his blueprint for success. He used to say, real engineers don't wear uniforms, they wear tools. When I got my commission at 27, he didn't attend the pinning ceremony. Just mailed a card that said, "Good luck. Stay safe." No rank, no title, just distance. By then, I had already stopped giving him updates. When my first research paper was published, an integrated model of microbial defense on closed-loop submarines, I sent a copy to my mother. I never asked if he read it. He didn't mention it, and I didn't bring it up. When I presented to the Joint Defense Task Force last year, I caught a glimpse of my name in the program Dr. Sloan Mercer, Strategic Biocontainment Division. I remember thinking this would be the one he couldn't ignore. 2 months later, he handed out awards to his team for an unrelated project in the same corridor. I was in uniform. He walked past me. He shook a junior engineer's hand with a smile, paused as our eyes met, then turned away. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself I had outgrown the need for acknowledgement. But even now, standing in this meeting with my name stripped from my rank, I can feel it, the old ache behind my ribs. That childhood ache when I once built a working oxygen filter out of aquarium parts, and he asked me if I'd just copied it off YouTube. I didn't grow up trying to be better than him. I just wanted him to see me without flinching. He never did. My career was made in windowless rooms and locked clean labs among teams who didn't care how softly I spoke, only how accurate I was. I learned to move without applause. I learned that silence could be a form of power. But part of me still remembered what it was like to be 13, standing in a science fair gymnasium, holding a blue ribbon he never came to see. And part of me still remembered the day I overheard him on the phone saying, "Sloan, she works in defense, I think. Some research thing I don't really follow." That was the same week I was flown to DC for classified debriefings. He didn't know. He never asked. He didn't need to ask, I guess. Because in his mind, I had already failed the moment I chose a path he couldn't recognize. And now, watching him gesture at a slide he barely understands, I realize something quietly vicious. He doesn't just underestimate me. He's built a career around pretending I don't exist. And that's why this moment matters. Not because I want revenge, but because he's about to realize I was in the room the entire time. The door opened with a quiet click. Not dramatic. No wind, no fanfare, just the kind of sound most people would miss, except the kind trained to listen for entrances. My father didn't stop talking. He had launched into a theoretical defense of the containment unit using words he didn't fully grasp, words that had once belonged to the part of me he chose to ignore. But I heard the shift. Subtle. The way the note-taker in the far corner straightened his back. The way a younger engineer lowered her pen mid-sentence. The way no one turned to look, but every spine in the room adjusted by a fraction of an inch. A presence had arrived. Then the voice came. Calm. Precise. With the kind of resonance that made air move differently. Major Mercer. That was all it took. My father paused mid-sentence laser pointer, still aimed at a rendering of the internal shell design. He turned toward the sound, toward the man in army dress blues standing in the doorway. The room shifted like water around a submerged shape. "Yes, sir," I answered without hesitation, without rising from my seat. The man stepped forward. His silver star insignia gleamed beneath the recessed lights. The hush that fell over the conference room wasn't out of politeness, it was instinct. The kind of silence that happens when authority walks into a space and takes ownership without needing to explain why. "Apologies for the delay," he said. "We had to reroute the secure files this morning. Major Mercer is cleared to receive and respond." He set a sealed folder in front of me and looked toward the screen. "Which iteration are we reviewing?" My father's voice came slower now. This is the composite model version 6. We've been discussing integration with potential biological countermeasures." "Excellent," the general said. Then, without turning his head, "Major Mercer, your assessment." Every eye in the room turned to me, and I stood, not rushed, not theatrical, just quietly, deliberately standing to my full height, shoulders, square head, level breath even. I opened the folder eyes, scanning the graphs I already knew by memory. I reached forward, clicked the remote on the table, and advanced to a different slide. Slide 23. The one no one had noticed was mislabeled. "This layer," I said, pointing to the lower quadrant of the schematic, "contains a fundamental flaw in the pressure threshold assumptions. The tolerance you've modeled assumes atmospheric redundancy, which doesn't exist in sealed sublevel environments." I turned to the room. The result isn't minor. A system failure at this point would trigger a feedback loop compromising your entire containment protocol. Someone near the back let out a soft curse. The general nodded. "I trust you've prepared a solution." I nodded once. "I submitted an alternate model to Stratcom 3 weeks ago. Approved last Friday. The memo just hasn't reached this division yet." The weight of the words landed hard. My father was pale. His hands gripped the edge of the table, not visibly, but I saw the pressure in his knuckles. Finally he spoke. "You submitted a model." The general turned to him, voice crisp. "Major Mercer is the lead researcher on Tier for biocontainment adaptations across multiple branches. She's served under my command for the last 3 years." A beat. She designed the solution your team is now testing. Silence. Not shocked silence. Shattered silence. I watched it hit him not as a single impact but in waves. The realization that I hadn't just joined the military. I had become a part of the very system he thought he outranked. And worse, that his project depended on me. His mouth opened like he meant to respond, but the words didn't form. And in that stillness, I felt something loosen inside me. Not satisfaction, not vengeance, just clarity. One of the younger engineers raised her hand timidly. "Major, if it's not classified, can we request your model summary for reference?" I nodded. "After clearance review, yes. I'll have my office transmit a redacted version." There was a pause. "Then, would you be willing to present it to our team next week?" I smiled slightly. "Not at him." "At the room, I'll consider it." The general tapped 2 fingers to his folder and nodded to me. "Carry on, Major." Then he turned, and just like that, the presence exited. The door closed behind him with the same soft click. But everything had changed. No one looked at my father. Not out of disrespect, out of discomfort. Out of the subtle shared knowing that something had shifted beneath the floor of the room. Something structural. The kind of shift you can't undo. I didn't wait for the meeting to end. The moment the general left, I gathered the folder, secured the files, and stepped away from the table. No ceremony, no eye contact. Just enough movement to say, "I'm done here." No one stopped me. Behind me, my father was still seated, one hand on the table, the other hovering midair, like he'd forgotten what to do with it. No one looked at him. He had become part of the furniture, fixed, silent, irrelevant. I walked down the hallway without hurrying. The sound of my boots echoed softly against the tile, not sharp but steady. I passed the engineering interns, the design analysts, a few contractors glancing at their phones. No one recognized me, and that was fine. They didn't need to, because for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I pushed through the side door of the facility and stepped into the sunlight. The air outside was dry, clipped by wind. I let it hit my face. Then, I heard its shoes on concrete. Not military boots, civilian heels. My mother's voice came cautious. "Sloan." I turned. She stood there holding her purse like a shield, her jacket slightly off one shoulder, as if she had rushed to follow me, but then didn't know what to say once she caught up. I didn't know she said. I waited. I knew you worked in defense, but I didn't know how much." I tilted my head. He never asked. She opened her mouth, closed it. "He's proud of you. No, Mom. He's surprised." She flinched. "Not because I was wrong, but because I wasn't." "I always thought you'd want to be like him," she said softly. "You were so good at building things." "I still build things," I said. "They're just harder to see." She stepped closer, one hand half extended, then stopped. I wish you had told us more." "I did. You just listened to him." The wind moved between us. She looked down. "Are you angry I thought about it?" "No," I said and meant it. "I'm just not waiting anymore." Her eyes filled with something. Regret, maybe, but not enough to change anything. I turned toward the parking lot. "Sloan," she called again, and this time her voice broke. "Are you coming home for Thanksgiving?" I didn't turn around. I just said, "I am home," and kept walking. That night, I sat alone in my quarters, still in uniform. I hadn't bothered to change. I left the folder on the desk and turned the old lamp on low. The shadows in the room softened. Everything made it feel more distant, less sharp. I pulled out a box from under the bed. Inside, the science fair ribbon. Faded now, but still real. I remembered that day, how I stood in the gymnasium beside my project on bacteria colonies in sealed containers. How I had waited by the doors longer than I should have, scanning every man who walked in, hoping just one of them would be him. He never came. I won first place. The teacher smiled. The judges clapped. My name was on the program, but the seat I saved in the front row stayed empty. That was the day I first understood being good wasn't enough if the person you wanted to notice was never looking. And so I stopped asking to be seen. But I never stopped building. A week later, I got a letter. Handwritten, not from my father, from the general. It was short. Some leadership doesn't speak it said. Some just stands still and the room adjusts around them. That's who you are, Major. Don't let them teach you otherwise. I folded it, once tucked it beside the ribbon, and locked the box. There are stories that never get told in the way we hoped. Not because they don't matter, but because the people we wanted to tell them to weren't capable of listening. And yet the stories remain. We carry them. We live them. We write them sometimes with our voices, and sometimes, like today, with our silence. 3 months passed. My father never reached out. My mother sent one message, something vague, about a holiday photo, and whether I wanted to be included. I didn't answer, but I saw the photo online. My parents, my brother, his wife. The caption, family, strong as ever. I stared at it for a moment, then closed the tab. Not out of pain, out of peace. Because the room they posed in, that smiling, polished room, didn't need me anymore. And more importantly, I no longer needed it. Sometimes people don't see you until someone else forces them to look. But the real shift, the one that matters, happens when you stop needing to be seen. That day in the conference room, when the general said my name, I didn't stand up to prove anything. I stood because I had been sitting long enough. And in that moment, without anger or performance, I became the thing he had never imagined his daughter could be. Unmistakable. I never heard from him again. Not after that meeting. Not after the project was reassigned. Not even when my name appeared on the Defense Department's quarterly innovations memo, listed as the lead contributor to a newly approved biocontainment protocol. My mother sent a card a few months later. No return address. Inside was a generic message. Hope you're doing well. Let us know if you ever visit. There was no signature, just a date. I never replied. Not out of bitterness, but because there was nothing left to say. People think silence is the absence of communication, but it isn't. Silence can be decisive. It can be a full sentence, a line drawn, a door closed without slamming. My father had drawn his version of that line years ago. With every joke at my expense, every conversation redirected toward my brother, every dinner table silence when I talked about things he didn't understand. His line said, "This is how far I'll go for you, no further." Mine simply said, "I won't stand here waiting," and that was enough. The lab has changed since then. We've expanded the scope of our research, collaborating with joint task forces and climate response teams. We're now working on long-term pathogen resistance in modular shelters tech that could save lives in flood zones, refugee camps, or deep space stations. Things he never would have imagined his daughter would touch. My team doesn't ask about my family. I don't talk about them. Not because it's painful, but because it's no longer relevant to who I am here. What matters is the work. And the way it continues, quiet, precise, purpose-driven. There's something holy about building systems that protect people who'll never know your name. About knowing your work outlives ego. That's what I chose. That's what he never understood. And honestly, I hope he never does. Some understandings only come at a cost. Some recognitions are only given when they're too late to mean anything. And I don't need that anymore. I don't need his apology. I don't need his change of heart. I don't need him to wake up one morning and finally say, "I see you now." Because I see myself. And that's what changed. Last week I walked past a cadet training seminar. Young officers, some barely in their 20s, sitting with wide eyes and stiff spines. I heard one ask his instructor, "How do you know if you're making the right decisions? If no one's clapping for you?" The instructor smiled and said, "Sometimes you don't hear the applause until years later. Sometimes you never hear it. Do it anyway." I stopped at the end of the hallway and wrote that line down in my notebook, because it reminded me of a time when I needed that answer too. There's a bench just behind our field lab tucked under a row of trees, where the light filters through soft and slow. I sit there sometimes after hours, watching the sun slip low behind the buildings. The sky goes from brass to silver. The air smells like heat and soil and steel, and I breathe. Not like a soldier, not like a daughter, just like myself. I used to believe identity was something we earned from others, that who I was would finally become real if he said it out loud, if he gave me the words I was starving to hear. But I was wrong. Identity is not confirmation. It's construction. You lay it brick by brick, choice by choice. You reinforce it in the quiet when no one's watching. You carry it into rooms where no one calls your name and still stand like you belong. And when someone finally does speak it, you smile not because you needed it, but because you never did. The photo from that day still exists. Someone on the general's team sent it to me, an internal memo image for record keeping. In it, I'm standing at the head of the table pointer, in hand eyes focused on the schematic. He's in the background, just barely visible. My father. His face turned slightly toward me, frozen in that single frame. There's no contempt there, no admiration either. Just realization. A man seeing something too late. I keep that photo in a drawer, not framed, not displayed. Just there like a pressed leaf from a season I've already lived through. Not because I want to remember him, but because I want to remember who I was in that moment. Still, unshaken, unmistakable. That was the day I stopped waiting to be seen and started living like I already was. My name is Nora Ellison. I'm 33 years old, and for most of those years, I've been my sister's rehearsal prop, quiet, convenient, and forgettable. At least that's who I was. Until the night everything changed. It happened at her engagement party, one of those extravagant affairs held at the Langford Hotel, where the walls glitter and the people do too. Everyone was there, friends, family, Darren's business partners, even our old neighbors who hadn't spoken to me in years, but somehow found seats right up front. Lila, my younger sister, the bride-to-be, stood under a chandelier the size of my apartment. She clinked her glass, smiled that toothpaste commercial smile, and grabbed the microphone like she'd won something. "Meet my maid of honor," she chirped. Oh, wait. No, never mind. She did a fake pout, then scanned the room until her eyes found me. Too ugly for the title. Had to find someone more photogenic. Laughter. Full, genuine laughter. Our parents clapped. Aunt Grace raised her wine. I didn't flinch. I smiled. Then I stepped forward and handed Darren a small white box tied with silver ribbon. I raised my glass and said only two things. To love, I said, and to getting exactly what you deserve. The music skipped, and in the second it took Darren to untie that ribbon, the entire room turned from golden warmth to cold silence. No one was laughing anymore, and for the first time in my life, neither was I. I grew up in a 3-bedroom colonial just outside of Glenford, the kind with white shutters and a porch swing that never quite stopped creaking. From the outside, it looked like the picture of suburban contentment, but inside our family had an unspoken script, and I was always in the background of every scene. Lila, 2 years younger, arrived into the world demanding center stage, and our parents were happy to build it for her. She sparkled, and they polished her brighter. I listened, studied, folded my emotions into small, quiet shapes. When she twirled in the living room for guests, I was the one serving lemonade. When she won a regional dance trophy, I was the one who sewed the rhinestones onto her costume the night before. There's a difference between being loved quietly and being completely overlooked. I didn't realize that until college, when my roommate once asked, "Do your parents ever ask how you're doing?" I had paused, genuinely unsure how to answer. Over the years, Lila grew bolder in the way she took up space. Not just in the family, but in mine. When I got accepted into a publishing internship, she announced her own surprise acceptance into a boutique PR firm our uncle chaired. When I brought home a guy I liked, Evan, from the library where I worked, she flirted with him until he stopped returning my texts. She called it harmless. "I'm just being me," she'd say. "It's not my fault men prefer a little sparkle." What made it worse was how normalized it became. My mother would shrug and say, "You know your sister, she's dramatic." Dad would add, "You can't take things so personally, Nora. You're the strong one." The strong one. As if being hurt in silence was some kind of virtue. I learned how to navigate family dinners like a ghost, helping Mom in the kitchen, laughing in all the right places, never pushing back, even when Lila made jokes at my expense. Like the time she said I looked like a before picture in a skincare commercial. Even the cousins laughed at that one. And I let it slide like I always did. But something shifted this year. Maybe it was how my boss at the library looked me in the eye and said, "You've got backbone, Ellison. You just hide it well." Maybe it was how I'd started enjoying my quiet routines, my apartment above the bookstore, my Tuesday tea with Mrs. Halpern from downstairs, the satisfaction of order and words and silence that didn't have to be explained. Or maybe it was the text Lila sent me 2 months before the engagement party. "Want to help with decorations? You're good at boring stuff." I stared at those words for 10 full minutes. And that was the moment I decided I wouldn't let her write the ending anymore. It started with my mother calling me in a panic one Thursday evening. "Nora, sweetheart, I need your help," she said, already breathless. "Lila wants the engagement slideshow to be perfect, but the computer won't cooperate. Can you come tomorrow? She's counting on me, and I'm hopeless with technology." I should have said no. I should have reminded her that I was scheduled for Saturday reading circle, or that I had weekend inventory at the library. But I heard that same old tremble in her voice, the one that made me a helper long before I knew how to say no. So the next morning, I showed up at my parents' house, where the living room still smelled like floor polish and old perfume. The dining table was covered in photo albums, USB cords, and my mom's frustration. "She wants this whole timeline of their love story," Mom muttered, clicking fruitlessly. "Meeting, first date, vacations." She even asked me to pull up the old family cloud folder. I don't even know how to access it anymore. I did. It took me 20 minutes to retrieve the password Lila had created. And that's when the notifications began popping up: unread messages, synced accounts, and one unfamiliar sender. Bo R. A name I didn't recognize. A message that read, "He's out of town again. Bring that champagne you love." At first I thought it was some wedding vendor. But curiosity has a way of peeling back layers. One click led to another, and suddenly I was staring at years of private messages between Lila and someone who very clearly wasn't Darren. And then came the videos. Candid, intimate, time-stamped. Some dated just weeks before the engagement announcement. In one, Lila leaned back in a hotel bed wine glass in hand laughing. "I'm marrying him for the money," she told Bo. His real name was listed in her phone as Bo Ramsey. "Give it 2 years and I'll walk away with half his family's inheritance." The air left my lungs. In another, she mentioned me. "Nora. She still thinks I actually care. She's helping with the slideshow, like for free." It's hilarious. My hands were shaking, but my thoughts were sharp. I didn't cry. I didn't call her. I copied everything onto a flash drive, cleared the history, and returned to the living room, like nothing happened. And as I zipped up my laptop bag, I smiled. Not the smile they'd taught me. Something colder, something earned. After that day, everything I did was calculated. I knew Lila. She was predictable in the worst way, impulsive, showy, and addicted to control. The more attention she got, the sloppier she became. That meant I couldn't confront her outright. Not yet. I needed a stage, one she wouldn't be able to escape once the lights came on. So I texted her 2 days later, cheerful as ever. "Need help with the florist or music cues? I'm happy to pitch in." She responded within 5 minutes. "Yes, finally. Thought you were going to be useless again." Typical. I offered to double-check the slideshow order, reach out to the venue, even manage the background music playlist. Every task she handed me felt like a rope she didn't realize I was braiding tighter around her. The flash drive, I labeled it for the projector and taped it under the top tray of my makeup kit. I rehearsed my toast nightly in the mirror glass in hand, working on the balance between grace and blade. "To love," I would say, "and to getting exactly what you deserve." Even now, I hear it like a spell waiting to be cast. Meanwhile, I played the part of the supportive sister perfectly. I laughed when she bragged about how Darren had finally proposed, listened, while she mocked his family's conservative values, and nodded when she described the designer dress that cost more than my rent. "Try not to look too plain next to me, okay?" she teased once. "Why, I want everyone to know we're related, but not confused about who's the bride." I let it roll off me as I always had. But this time, it wasn't weakness. It was precision. During one of our planning meetings, Darren stopped by with catering forms. He looked tired. Not physically, but soul-tired, like someone who was constantly performing in a play he hadn't auditioned for. His smile was distant. His eyes drifted when Lila talked. He glanced at me once, as he left, almost like he wanted to say something. I said nothing. Not yet. By the time the engagement party approached, every moving part was in place. The projector, the playlist, the champagne, and the truth. Waiting in my purse like a loaded weapon no one suspected I carried. The Langford ballroom smelled like roses and effort. Crystal chandeliers cast polished light across polished people, and somewhere beneath it all, I stood invisible, as always, but calm. Not numb, not bitter. Just steady. Like someone who knew how the night would end before it even began. I arrived early, as Lila demanded, wearing a navy blue dress she once called funeral chic. It was simple, clean, forgettable. Just the way she liked me. The venue staff buzzed around like bees with platinum headsets. Lila floated in an hour later, a vision in sequins and self-satisfaction. She didn't notice how the staff's smiles stiffened around her. She didn't notice the way Darren's jaw tightened every time she spoke. But I did. She barely greeted me before ordering check that the projector's working and cue the playlist. I don't want another one of your tech hiccups. Then she kissed the air near my cheek and moved on to someone more important. I made my way to the sound booth. The technician looked confused when I handed him a flash drive labeled Engagement Slideshow. All synced, I asked. He nodded. Yeah, want me to run it after the toast, exactly. People started arriving in waves, his family in muted silks and dark suits, hers in louder fabrics and louder voices. My parents floated between groups, like political figures, at a fundraiser telling everyone how proud they were, how both girls turned out so different, but equally special. I didn't speak much. I watched. From the corner near the champagne tower, I saw it unfold exactly as I'd envisioned. Lila called for attention with a spoon against a flute, basked in the moment, and then, without warning, turned it into a punchline. My sister Nora, she chirped. Some people thought she'd be my maid of honor, but, come on. We want this album to look good, right? Laughter broke like a wave. Even my father chuckled. I took a slow breath. Then I stepped forward, smiling. I brought you a gift, I said, holding the small white box out to Darren. Something I thought you both should see. He blinked. The crowd quieted. Lila's smile dimmed. To love, I said, raising my glass. And to getting exactly what you deserve. The room hushed. At first it was just confusion. People assumed I was making a sentimental gesture, something sweet and awkward from the overlooked sister. Even Lila tried to brush it off with a laugh that sounded too sharp. Ah, how thoughtful, she said, her voice a little too high. Is it earrings or a poem? Darren, open it. She worked so hard. But Darren didn't move right away. He turned the small white box over in his hands. His brows knit. Then slowly, he pulled at the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, the silver flash drive gleamed like a scalpel waiting for skin. Someone in the back murmured, "Play it on the projector." Lila froze. Darren looked at me. I nodded once. There's a reason it's labeled Engagement Slideshow. He walked without a word to the technician near the sound booth. The man glanced toward me for confirmation. I gave it with a single nod. And then the screen came alive. At first, it was subtle. Lila's face on screen laughing. A hotel room in the background, wine glass in hand. Audio kicked in a second later. Aiden, stop recording me. You're terrible. Laughter. She threw a pillow. The room chuckled. Until, of course I'm going to marry him. Do you know how much his family is worth? 2 years max? Then I file. Half of it becomes mine. Easy. The laughter died. On screen, Lila sipped her wine. And Nora, she's making the slideshow. I didn't even ask. She's like, built to be used. She thinks I love her. Someone gasped. Darren stood motionless, fists clenched. Turn that off, Lila snapped. That's private. That's fake. She edited it. But then the second clip started. The same room, same timestamp. But this time, with both of them, Lila and Aiden, Kissing, laughing, plotting. You think Darren suspects anything? Please, Lila scoffed. He's too busy trying to impress his father. The ballroom was silent. All you could hear was the air conditioning kicking on, and a crystal glass someone dropped near the bar. And in that moment, I realized something simple and stunning. I wasn't the punchline anymore. Lila was. And she knew it. Lila lunged. Not toward Darren, toward the technician. "Turn it off!" She shrieked, her voice cracking in a way I'd never heard before. "You don't have permission to play that. This is defamation. This is criminal." But Darren stepped in front of her. One hand raised his voice level and cold. "Let it finish," she faltered. For a moment, her mouth opened like she was going to argue, then closed again. On screen, the next video began her bragging to Aiden about Darren's trust fund, about timing the prenup just right, about letting Nora run errands to keep her distracted. People were shifting now. Chairs scraped against the floor. My aunt whispered something sharp to my mother. Darren's father, Mr. Kingsley, stepped forward from the back jaw set tight. "You signed our agreement in bad faith," he said, his voice steady but lethal. "Any legal protection you hope to gain is void." "That was fraud, Miss Ellison." Lila turned on him. "You can't talk to me like that. You don't know what she's done. Nora set this up. She's jealous. She's always been jealous." Darren reached for her hand. Not to hold it. To take the ring. She resisted at first, but he didn't let go. "I was ready to marry you," he said, quiet but audible. "Even when things didn't feel right." I thought maybe it was the stress, the pressure. "But this is who you are." He slid the ring off her finger. Her hand trembled. Her mouth opened again, then collapsed into a strangled sob. "I loved you," she whispered. "No," he replied. "You loved what I had." Then he turned and walked toward the exit, his father behind him, a few friends following. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was judgmental, disbelieving, final. Lila turned to me like I had summoned fire. "You destroyed everything," she spat. I didn't flinch. I didn't destroy anything I said. I just let the lights come on. Behind her, the wedding planner approached, with a clipboard and a tight face. "Miss Ellison, we need to discuss payment. The venue, the catering. You're the listed primary contact." Lila looked at her like the woman had spoken a foreign language. And that's when I saw it. The first real crack in her mask. The morning after the party, Glenford was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels deliberate, like the town itself was holding its breath. I stood by my window, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee, watching the fog curl along the sidewalks. Across the street, the bakery opened its shutters, and Mrs. Halpern swept her stoop in her lavender slippers like it was any other day. Except it wasn't. Not for me. Not for Lila. And not for anyone who'd been in that ballroom the night before. By 8 a.m., the messages began. Friends, acquaintances, people I hadn't heard from since high school. The video had made it online, short, shaky clips of the projector footage, followed by blurry footage of Darren walking out. Hashtags bloomed like weeds. The comments were ruthless. The headlines sharper than I expected: bride caught plotting divorce for profit during her own engagement party. I didn't read the threads. I didn't need to. I hadn't done it for the internet. That morning, I watered my herbs, cleaned my bookshelves, and took out the trash like always. And when I passed Mr. Donnelly, the war vet, who lived 2 doors down, he tipped his cap and said, "You held your ground, Miss Ellison." I didn't ask how he knew. I just said, "Thank you." That afternoon, my mother called. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. "I don't know what to say," she began, voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Then, maybe don't say anything," I replied. "Just listen." She did. To everything. When I finished, there was a long pause on her end. Then quietly, "We failed you." I didn't say she was right. I didn't say she was wrong. Some wounds don't close with one apology. But I appreciated that, for once, she hadn't tried to rewrite it. Lila didn't call, but someone told me she'd left town, that her job put her on unpaid leave, that the Kingsley family was considering legal action, that even Madison had cut ties. I didn't feel triumphant, just done. It wasn't about watching her fall. It was about stepping out from under her shadow. For years, I thought being quiet meant being good, That shrinking myself made things easier for everyone. That maybe if I kept giving more one day, I'd be enough. But that night in front of everyone who used to laugh with her, I finally stopped waiting for someone to let me speak. I spoke, and the world shifted. I still live above the same bakery. I still work at the library, still host story time on Thursdays, still drink tea with Mrs. Halpern. But now people look at me differently. Not like the sister of someone impressive. Not like a shadow. They look at me. And more importantly, I finally look at myself. Not with apology, but with something closer to pride. Because I didn't set fire to her life. I just stopped holding the water bucket. And sometimes that's all it takes to let the truth burn through. My name is Emery Beckett. I've worn a uniform longer than I've worn my own last name with comfort. Most days I don't think about where I came from, not because I forgot, but because remembering costs more than silence ever did. The envelope came on a Tuesday. Thick cream paper, no return address, just my sister's name, in bold cursive, on the back flap, Joelle. Inside 6 words. Family dinner, Sunday, 6 p.m. No plus ones, no warmth, no explanation. Not even a hope you're well. Just instructions. Like she thought she still had that kind of authority over me. Joelle Brenner Chesterdale's police chief town queen, and the last person I expected to summon me home. She didn't come to my commissioning. Didn't call when Dad died. Didn't even pretend to check in when I got back from Kandahar the second time, still bleeding, still breathing. She just vanished behind her badge and let the town believe I'd abandoned them first. I should have thrown the card out, but I didn't. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was habit. Maybe it was some part of me still stupid enough to think things could be different. I filed a 48-hour leave with Blackwater Command, didn't pack my uniform, and flew civilian. 1 pair of jeans, 1 gray coat, 1 pair of boots I could run in if I had to, and a secure signal band embedded in my belt clasp standard issue for Level 6 intelligence operatives under sealed directive. I'd survived black sites in the Caucasus and fire corridors in Iraq. I could survive one Sunday dinner. But as I stood on the porch of the house, I used to call home, staring at Joelle's patrol car, parked just a little too neatly out front, I realized something. This wasn't an invitation. It was bait. The front door hadn't changed. Still the same crooked brass knocker, the same crack running down the right-hand corner of the frame, like a scar no one bothered to fix. I knocked once, the door opened before I could knock again. Grandma answered. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, slower, but not softer. Her eyes stayed sharp, sharper than I expected. She reached for me before I could speak. Her hug was brief, tight. Her hand rested against the back of my head, just long enough for me to hear her whisper, "Don't rise to it, sweetheart. Not tonight." I didn't ask what it was. I already knew. Inside the house smelled like lemon polish and leftover pot roast. There were too many shoes at the entryway, some new, some too clean for this town. I slipped past them in silence. Joelle stood in the living room, one hand on her hip like she owned the place. Her badge was visible, angled just right to catch the light. "Well," she said, "you actually showed." I kept my voice steady. "Good to see you too, Chief." Her jaw tightened. She didn't respond. Just turned and walked toward the dining room. The table was set for 12. Grandma used to sit at the head, but tonight she was tucked down at the far end, like a guest in her own home. Joelle had claimed the center seat like this was her court, and everyone else was just decoration. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my mother. She was already seated, wine glass in hand, pretending not to watch me as I took the empty seat across from Joelle. No one stood, no one offered a smile. A few nods. That was all. I passed the bread when it came around, complimented the potatoes, answered questions about the flight like I hadn't just walked into an ambush disguised as a family gathering. I kept my posture loose, my voice, even my eyes soft, but I saw the man standing outside. He was across the street, pretending to walk a dog that never sniffed the ground. Baseball cap, too clean, posture too rigid. Civilian clothes couldn't hide military training, not from me. My fingers tightened around the water glass. I leaned back just slightly, letting my belt clip press into the chair. Just enough for the pressure sensor to read the contact. The clasp vibrated once. Signal sent. Joelle caught my eyes from across the table. She didn't look irritated anymore. She looked satisfied. And I knew right then this wasn't about dinner. This was about power. And she thought she still had some over me. She was wrong. Joelle raised her wine glass, tapped her fork against it, like she was officiating a wedding. I didn't blink. I'd like to say a few words. She began, eyes locked on me, not even pretending it was about anything else. It's rare these days to have us all under one roof again. A few scattered nods. Grandma looked down at her plate. My mother sipped her wine, eyes unfocused. No one seemed to notice how Joelle's voice had shifted, calculated, crisp, like a speech she'd practiced in front of a mirror. There's something important I need to address before we eat, she continued. She reached down and lifted a red folder from beneath her chair, thick and too organized. No one else reacted. But I had seen folders like that before, usually across briefing tables in locked rooms, or when evidence was about to be weaponized. She opened it, pulled out papers, photos, printed screenshots. This, she said, holding one page up like a teacher shaming a student, is an application for military clearance, submitted under the name Emery Beckett. It contains a forged DD-214, falsified deployment records, and a fabricated clearance level. This application was used to access benefits, stipends, and transport channels tied to active federal operations. The room fell quiet. Cousin Derek coughed. Aunt Linda whispered something to her husband. My mother didn't even lift her head. Joelle set the folder on the table and looked straight at me. I'm placing you under arrest for impersonating a federal officer and theft of government property. Silence cracked across the table like lightning. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just watched her round the table pull the handcuffs from her belt like she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in her head. She snapped them on. Tight. Too tight. My fingers tingled from lack of circulation. She wanted it to hurt. She wanted everyone to see her doing this. And no one stopped her. Not my mother. Not my grandmother. No one stood between us. No one asked if she had proof. They just watched. And Joelle smiled like the curtain had finally gone up on the show she'd been dying to perform. I counted in silence. Not aloud. Not with my fingers. Just inside, like we were taught in field school when waiting for exfil or extraction. Breathe in. Count. Breathe out. Don't show the rhythm. Don't let them know it's coming. Joelle continued talking, like she was delivering closing arguments in court. Her voice took on the cadence of command, a voice designed for control. You've never been honest with this family. You disappeared. You show up in rental cars, wear watches that don't belong here, and talk like you're owed something. But you never told us the truth. Truth. The word tasted like rust. She waved toward the folder, like it was divine scripture. Everything you need to know is in here. Photographs, logs, documentation. And I'll be contacting the state attorney's office first thing tomorrow. Grandma looked up for the first time, her eyes glassy. Joelle? Maybe not here. Yes, Joelle said too fast. Here is exactly where it needs to happen. You all deserve to know who she really is. She paced now behind me, in front of the table. My back ached from the cuffs digging into the bone. I didn't adjust my posture. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I only shifted my heel just enough to keep pressure on the clasp that had already pinged base. 10 minutes. Across the street, the fake dog walker was gone, which meant someone closer had eyes inside now. Good. Joelle's voice rose again. She's not who she says she is. I've verified it. No record in the VA system. No service history under that name. It's all a fabrication. She's been lying to us for years. I finally looked up straight at her. My voice came out cold low. You checked the VA database, yes, she said proudly. You think the VA has access to personnel records from Blackwater Strategic Intelligence. Her mouth parted, then shut again. She didn't know the name. Most people didn't. That was the point. The silence at the table thickened. 12 minutes. That's the average time from ping to presence if the signal's flagged priority alpha. I adjusted my stance just enough to feel my fingertips again, and waited for the back door to open. The sound was soft, just the faint groan of an old hinge giving way. Most of the table didn't hear it, but Joelle did. She froze mid-sentence, her hand still resting on the damning red folder, like it gave her some kind of authority badge beyond the one on her belt. Did anyone hear? She began. Then, a voice low and clear came from just outside the kitchen doorway. Ma'am, please remove your service weapon and place it on the table. Slowly. The room turned in unison, eyes wide, neck stiff. My cousin dropped his fork. My mother's wine glass tilted in her hand, but she didn't drink. No one moved. Joelle's jaw twitched. I don't have you're wearing a department-issued sidearm on your right hip. Remove it. Table. Now. She turned slowly, trying to keep her breath even, but her eyes darted like someone realizing the fire she started was now out of her hands. Another voice joined female this time. Steady. This is a federal security intervention. You need to comply immediately. Joelle reached for her badge instead. Do not, the male voice warned. Do not reach for anything else. She paused. The silence was brutal. Long. Then finally, she unholstered her weapon and laid it on the table with 2 fingers like it might bite her. From the kitchen, a woman in plain clothes stepped forward. Clean jeans, black field boots, soft gray Henley tucked in tight. No name tag, no insignia, just presence. I'm Agent Rollins, she said. We've reviewed the folder. Joelle's mouth opened, but Rollins held up one hand. Your PI accessed a secure facility without clearance. Your evidence includes printed materials from a classified cache belonging to Blackwater Strategic Command. That cache was under temporary transfer protection overseen by General Emery Beckett. The room didn't gasp. It exhaled, a collective breaking of whatever spell Joelle had woven around them. Rollins turned to me. Are you physically harmed? I shook my head once. No, ma'am. She nodded toward the hallway. A second agent stepped into view, holding a small black device. He tapped it once. The cuffs clicked open. My arms dropped free. And Joelle's certainty shattered right there on Grandma's table. I didn't rush to rub the red marks on my wrists. That would have made it about pain, and this wasn't about pain. This was about power, and who never really had it. Joelle stood stiff, as if the air had become too thick to breathe. Her hands hung at her sides, useless now. Her badge didn't shine anymore. It just looked small. Agent Rollins stayed calm, voice steady as granite. Your private investigator breached federal protocols, entered a restricted storage site under false pretense, and removed documentation tied to a sealed intelligence operation. You not only used that information, you distributed it, publicly, without verification. Joelle's lips parted, but she said nothing. That's obstruction. That's unlawful detainment. That's unauthorized possession of classified assets. Rollins continued, each word landing like a measured strike. And the attempt to use those materials to arrest a federal officer. That's criminal abuse of power. Joelle looked at me. Then not with apology, not even shame. Just disbelief. As if she couldn't comprehend how the script she wrote had been burned without her permission. You called them, she whispered. I didn't answer. Rollins didn't wait. Chief Brenner, you are hereby placed on temporary suspension pending federal review. You are not to leave Chesterdale County. You are not to contact anyone associated with this case. Your service weapon will be logged as evidence. You'll receive instructions within 72 hours. Agent Moore, her silent counterpart, stepped forward and sealed the holstered weapon into a labeled evidence pouch. The sound of the zip crackled like thunder. Still, no one at the table moved. No one protested. Not even my mother. Rollins turned to me. "General Beckett, do you wish to press charges at this time?" I looked around the room at my grandmother, silent and trembling. At cousins who'd avoided eye contact the entire night. At my mother, eyes cast downward, like someone hoping not to be asked to pick a side. Then I looked back at Rollins. "No," I said. "She'll carry this longer than any sentence I could ask for." Rollins gave the slightest nod. "Understood." And just like that, Joelle Brenner, my sister, became a cautionary tale in her own house. Joelle didn't speak as the agents left. She didn't slam a door, didn't shout, didn't plead. She just stood there, a badgeless silhouette in her own broken ceremony, staring at the empty folder, like it might still save her if she stared hard enough. No one dared to ask what happened. No one dared to ask me anything at all. I rose from my seat. The chair's quiet scrape across the floor was the only sound. My fingers brushed the folder Joelle had left behind. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I'd lived every page of it, every operation blacked out in public records, every scar it never mentioned. She'd tried to weaponize my life, and instead exposed her ignorance. I walked around the table slowly. My mother finally looked up. Her face was pale, uncertain. She opened her mouth to say something maybe I didn't know, or worse. She meant well, but I didn't give her the chance. 8 years, I said quietly. 8 years I waited for someone to ask how I was, or if I was safe, or why I never came home. No one responded. "I wasn't hiding," I added. "You just stopped looking." Joelle shifted her weight. "I was protecting the family," she muttered. "No," I said, my voice sharper now, slicing through the air. "You were protecting the version of the family where you always win." I turned to leave. Then I stopped at the hallway. "By the way," I said over my shoulder, "you might want to scrub your department's servers. Because in 24 hours, your internal affairs division is going to start asking questions. A lot of them." Joelle flinched. I stepped outside without looking back. The night was cold, but the air tasted clean. My car waited at the curb, tinted engine warm. A man in uniform stood beside it, Major Carter, my aide. He opened the door without a word. "You're early," I said. He offered a small grin. "Standard protocol. Your belt pinged, priority alpha." I paused before getting in. The house behind me sat still silent, like a stage after the curtain falls. Let them sit with it. Let them live with it. 8 months passed. I didn't think about that night much. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined me. People like Joelle spent their lives crafting myths around themselves, convinced that control is the same as power. But when the silence falls, when the lights go out, truth has a way of echoing louder than any accusation. I was promoted not long after Lieutenant General, officially. A quiet ceremony, no press, no family. That was by design. Most mornings, I rose before the base did. Reviewed mission readiness, signed off on command rotation, drank my coffee in a room filled with people who saw me for who I was not, who I'd once been in someone else's house. Then the letter came. It arrived with no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Joelle's. Sharp, angular, almost aggressive. She used to write notes like that when we were kids, bossy lists of chores taped to the fridge like they carried authority. I let it sit unopened on my desk for 3 days. Then, late one night, after a debrief that ran long, and a silence I couldn't shake, I opened it. "I didn't know who you were," she wrote. "Not really. I thought it was theater or maybe desperation. I didn't understand the life you chose. I still don't. But I was wrong. And I'm sorry." That was it. No signature, no return address, just the confession. I held the letter for a while, fingers tracing the pressure of the ink. Then I reached for the burn canister beneath my desk, the one reserved for classified disposal. I dropped it in. Not out of anger, but because I didn't need it. Forgiveness isn't a letter. It isn't a badge or a public apology. Sometimes it's just letting something turn to ash quietly when no one's watching. I stood, walked outside, and let the wind take the last of the smoke. I wasn't Joelle's sister anymore. I wasn't anyone's secret or liability or burden. I was just Emery Beckett. And that finally was enough. 2 weeks later, I stood on a frozen runway outside Ramstein Boots, firm on concrete wind, sharp against my face. A mission had gone critical, an intel leak, a compromised asset, and 40 lives hanging on my word. Ma'am, the colonel beside me said HQ's awaiting green light. I looked at the aircraft C-17 engines already humming team prepped inside. No fear, just waiting, for me. I gave a single nod. Proceed. The doors sealed. The tarmac roared, and I stood there steady. It hit me, then no one here questioned me. Not like Joelle, not like my mother. No sideways glances, no whispered doubts. Just trust. Out here I wasn't someone's little sister. I wasn't the family disappointment, the name they erased from dinner tables and yearbooks. Out here I was General Emery Beckett. And that was enough. I turned from the flight line gloves, pulled tight voice steady in the headset as I gave the next set of orders. Precise. Calm. Back in Chesterdale, Joelle would still be rewriting her version of that night. But I wouldn't hear it. I had no more space for old noise. Only movement. Only truth. Only forward. The world didn't need to know what happened at that dinner table. But they'd remember who gave the order that night and who followed it without hesitation. And in the quiet beyond the wind and steel and silence, that would always be mine.